it is my fault. I am the curator and I have coerced these good people to do this. And I sent them a bunch of questions, and I'm sure we'll be able to get to definitely a few of them. So I was going to ask them each to.
Would it be okay if I introduce you? I didn't get to read your bio yet.
Wait, I'll do it. I'll save you some. Save you some. I'm a poet. I'm a book editor, writer of all things, and I live in Minneapolis. I'm an adoptee. I've done work with MidWest Mixed before, and it was just really, really wonderful, like homecoming type experience as a transracial adoptee to be included in the bigger umbrella of mixed and adopted folks in community. I have 2 children who are multiracial, Korean, Mexican, which I know is not an ethnicity, but there's some genetic mysteries, and European American. That's good. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to ask each person to just talk a bit about their path as an artist, like how did they become an artist? And if they would say something a bit about how their culture or cultures come into their artwork, just as an introduction of, where they are in the world as an art maker. So I thought we could go in the order of David, Hye-Kyong, Merle, and then Ty, if that's okay. So David, did you mind going first and saying a bit about how you got into this?
No, not at all.
Thank you.
I think I felt the calling to art at a really young age. I think I had already figured it out before I even knew how to write longhand very well, that there was a writer in here somewhere that was going to come out someday. And what was great about those early years is that I had a fabulous support network of aunties and uncles and my mother and my father and cousins who not only saw that about me, but really appreciated it. So I got a lot of love thrown my way. And even in my neighborhood in Northwest DC growing up, it wasn't always a safe place for a nerd like me. But even there, the kids who were really, kind of gang oriented and gang affiliated appreciated the fact that I seemed to be about something, and were very supportive and wouldn't let anybody mess with me, right? So, as I began to write and share those gifts, I got support from all over the place, and it was consistent and nurturing and beautiful. All of it was soul food. So, it was no surprise to anybody who had ever known me that that wound up being the path that I set my feet on and that I've stayed on pretty much my whole life.
That's amazing. I'm so glad that they had your back like that. Thanks, David. Mm-hmm. Hye-Kyong?
Hey, as David, I think when I was really young, before even words, I was really into pretend, and I would just make up stories and play them out. I was raised as an only child, and so I just spent hours just acting things out and engaging in deep storylines, and it was so exciting. And then, I just picked it up like 4th grade, just loving, like, in school, and you create your own books and you draw and you create your own stories, and I went from there. And I noticed, like, for me as a Korean adoptee, I struggled with voice a lot, so it's just very interesting, my process, and to this day I can, at one point I was ironically diagnosed with expressive language disorder, learning disorder, because there has been so much of a felt sense of grief and loss and trauma that there are no words to it. And so I do struggle with the verbal articulation of words. But I remember the psychologist at that time being so puzzled though, like, but why do you write? How can you write? But writing was something that I loved, and I found the words. And so I did a lot of acting out beforehand to get to that place where I would eventually find the words. So that's kind of been my process since I was very young. And I'm just kind of articulating, putting those pieces together, even just this year as I look into my path.
Yeah, thank you, Hye-Kyong. I'm already like in dreamland with you two. Merle?
Hi, everyone. Well, I'm going to continue the trend and talk about my childhood because I do think that there is a truth in our young selves, and that's something that I continue to return to. So, like David, like Hye-Kyung, I think that the kind of like inner energy of me has probably always been a creative one. I still struggle with labels because I'm a jumble of so many different things, but I've always loved art. I was drawing, pretty much as soon as I could hold a pen, and I am grateful that my parents, kind of let me go wild with art supplies as a young person. And with writing too, I think that I just naturally always gravitated towards stories and reading, and wanted to make books. And I'm mirroring a lot of what David and Hye-Kyung have said too, but I just think that like it was always in me. And actually part of my journey has been recovering some of I think what I left behind for a lot of my teens and 20s. Now as I'm approaching middle age, I'm kind of giving myself permission to really embrace visual art again. And I find that that's a growth edge for me because I left it behind for probably a good 20 years. And in terms of identity too, that's been a lifelong process. As a mixed race person who grew up as the child of, actually both of my parents are immigrants. My dad was actually born in France. His mother was first generation French, so he's technically kind of 1.5. My mother is South Korean, and we weren't taught the Korean language, for example. My mom was in a generation of Korean immigrants where I think she felt a lot of pressure to assimilate. So, in terms of my racial identity, I grew up very quote unquote white. And, I really had to reach into my own sources of inquiry and resourcefulness to connect to communities that were also a part of me. And as a queer person, as a non-binary person, I mean, I didn't grow up with that language. I don't even think I had non-binary in my vocabulary until I was in my late 20s. So I think even generationally, even though queer people and what we call non-binary people have always existed, I think just my positionality and my age and where and when in the world I was born, those have been things that I've had to discover, like in my 20s and into my 30s. And now I'm kind of in a place of just wanting to be all of those things and stepping into that fully with my art and with what I create.
Thank you so much. Ty.
Hello. I'll start by saying if y'all hear any strange noises in my background, I have 2 kittens and I cannot get them to calm down. So you may hear things crashing, and that's just life tonight. Yeah, I'm actually going to kind of break away from the established mold a bit in that I didn't really find writing at that young age personally. I had it in my head I was going to be a cartoonist, and then I realized I could not draw to save my life. But then in high school, I really discovered writing in social justice theater and spoken word. And it really lit a fire inside of me in my life. I finally had an outlet for all of these strong feelings and thoughts I had about the world, so on and so forth. And then I hit 18 and decided it was time to get a real job and make money. And so I just like quit all art for many years. And then kind of found my footing again in the artistic world through puppetry, and writing, different puppet performance pieces. And then from there, I rediscovered my love of poetry and began writing children's books. And here we are. My culture and my identity as a multiracial Black man definitely play a huge role in the art that I create. How could it not? The book that Sun Yung already plugged is a good example. My debut is about a little girl going to her first protest after a Black man is killed by police, heavily influenced by what transpired in Minneapolis. And so I think that's a good snapshot of my work. I'm certainly multifaceted, but I think all of my work is informed by these experiences of, one, being a Black man in Minneapolis, and two, being a mixed race Black man in Minneapolis and not always having that strong sense of belonging. Yeah, that's what I got.
Thank you so much. I just put the link to Hye's first book, Sarah Rising. You can buy, of course, anywhere books are sold, but he provided the link to Moon Palace. So that's in there too. And then I have more links to come. So thank you, everyone. My next round of questions is really, we're in a time that I couldn't have imagined 10 years ago or 15 years ago, when I started more formally studying somatic. It's a trademarked modality by Peter Levine called somatic experiencing. And my first teacher was Thea Lee, who's a member of the South Minneapolis community. And she had put out a call for women of color who wanted to heal from racism. And when this came through my email 10, 12 years ago, I was just shocked. I was like, what is that? What? And so, 8 or so of us women came together and interestingly, and I think not surprisingly, when you think about it, all of us are either mixed in interracial relationships, both adopted, queer, non-binary at this point, using that identification. And because we didn't fit in very well in a lot of other, kinds of boxes. So anyway, that was the beginning of my formal investigation into embodied healing. So my question for each of you, and, to share with our community who's come here, is what's your definition of healing? And would you share something of how you came to that definition, or that might not be the right word, but what is it meaning to you, these days? And maybe we go Merle, Ty, Hye-Kyong, David. That's okay.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's something that, I think I can best put into the terms of healing, I think, is a matter of how you change your relationship to whatever struggle it is you're going through, in a way that allows you to create some sort of shift that, may be separate actually from a quote unquote cure. For example, I have dealt with serious illness in my life, multiple, the biggest one being cancer. And, I had the help of a lot of not only conventional medicine doctors, but also a lot of holistic healers, my own shamanic teacher. I had a lot of help from people who helped to show me how to relate to my illness differently. It doesn't mean that I'm cured. I'm going to live with this for the rest of my life. I'll have this diagnosis until I die. But the way that I heal from it, though, is a matter of changing my own relationship to illness, or even beyond illness. How do we heal from trauma, for example? That might also become a matter of how do you build a different relationship with that trauma, so that it doesn't overshadow your life anymore, even though something like grief or something like trauma may always be there, but we learn to live with it. So I guess that's in a nutshell how I would say I understand healing at this point. But I also think that healing happens at multiple levels too. And so, just to say that our healing is both individual, but it also can happen on a collective level. And so, just to kind of tie into the topic of ancestral healing too, that, when we heal as individuals, we also heal for the ancestors and we heal for those who come after us. So it also has that ripple effect.
Thank you so much. Hye-Kyong?
Yeah, so I don't want to be redundant. I think like Merle and I are on the same page with healing. I do want to talk a little bit. I'm a somatic experiencing practitioner, and I just want to share that part for me personally, that a lot of how I've understood healing is really on a somatic level and a spiritual level. And I'm a I'm a therapist, but what I've learned is, and it really changed everything, because when we go through these experiences, this connects me to that what I was talking about with the expression about there's no words. It's so visceral, that a lot of our trauma is so stuck in our limbic system. And so I just saw when I started SE, through Thea Lee too. I met Thea Lee, and I couldn't believe just migraines left, or more manageable, and shamanic work too. These are two, talk therapy just can't get at it. And so for me, I really leaned into that, and in my work as a therapist as well as a writer, to just really work with healing in this bodily somatic kind of way. It was just so powerful, and I can't even explain in really good words today. It's just an experience that has been really important in not only in my healing, but it became very important in why I went on to do somatic experiencing, so that I could share it with the community, learn a much more decolonized kind of approach at therapy, and really healing people, working with it, because somatic experiences, I'm just facilitating, and it's individual work, and collective work, community work too, and really healing ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's so deep. Yeah, especially for those of us who are born into different languages, right? And then taken away from those languages. Yeah, and so words, right? I mean, I'm a word person, and yet this exploration of somatic work and body work has touched my grief in a way that 5,000 years of talk therapy hasn't gotten into, yeah, thank you. Ty.
Yeah, I really loved what Merle said about the difference between a cure and a treatment. That was something that I also arrived at when I was thinking about what healing looks like, particularly linking it to ancestral healing, what we're here to talk about today. Unfortunately, I was born a pessimist and a pragmatist, and that is just my reality. So for me, healing looks like lessening the symptoms of the illness, right? So I think about racism in this country. It seems to me a thing that's not going to go anywhere anytime soon. And so for me, healing looks like prioritizing self, and doing my best to create my own pockets of community and have that be a sort of treatment for self. And then outside of that, I agree that there is there's the self-healing, and then there's also a responsibility to at least try to be a part of this larger societal healing. And I think all I really can do as an artist is try to be that small little drop in the bucket to try to help contextualize things for the youth and help them on their path to understanding so that healing can even take place or be considered as an option. I hope that's not too dour of a stance, but it is.
You know me, Ty Chapman. Do you even know me? There is nothing too dour. That's my first, middle, and last name. So thank you for bringing in the dour space balloon. Always. No, always. That's so real. Alicia Garza's book that I read this summer, which blew my mind, it's incredible. I highly recommend it. I mean, she talked about that in terms of, all the things that she's working on, and that in the movement for Black Lives is ongoing, working on for 400, 500 years. She knows that she's not going to see the fruition of her organizing work to the extent that she would like to see it in this lifetime. But she realized as her own mother was dying and was in hospice that she decided that she was going to see herself as a death worker for what is dying, and a doula for what needs to be born, what is being born, the new world, the new ways. And that's really stuck with me, as part of this conversation, ongoing conversation. So yeah, thank you. And David, what does he mean to you, and what does that word mean to you? Or yeah.
I guess I think of it as an ever shape-shifting, ever evolving movement toward whatever feels like wholeness to you. And I think, what feels like wholeness to you as an 8-year-old is going to feel different. And in some ways the same, maybe when you're 18, different, but also similar in some ways when you're in your 20s, and so forth and so on, at every stage of your life and every chapter of your life. And there really are different seasons to our lives, right? Where there's certain things that we know we've got to turn our attention to trying to figure out, and adjust the way we look at the world and adjust the way we behave in the world according to those things that we feel that bubble up, right, from our consciousness deep inside, and that remind us what we need to be doing in any given moment in order to continue to militate towards wholeness, not just for ourselves, but for everybody around us. There's a Sufi school that I was exposed to when I was young, that from whom I learned the saying, when we stand with our feet firmly rooted in this world, and as we pray, we bow into the next world, and then we smile with the recognition that this is the other world, right? The world that we're rooted in. And if you have that consciousness, then it's difficult to have a, kind of that rigid, kind of religiosity that sees the world and physicality as some sort of enemy, instead of as your friend, your mother, your nurturer. And when you are attuned that way, you recognize that everything you encounter in the world can be a teacher, right? Even pain and discomfort, and even what we think of as disease. You discover that the more you kind of expect the world to be your teacher, the more that part of the world that is nurturer and lover turns towards you and has things to show you. It's almost like, jumping up and down in front of you and asking you, begging you to please pay attention, because here's the next thing that I need you to understand. So I've been trying to walk through the world that way for a long time. And I'm lucky that I've had people in my life, like a grandmother who um, understood nature on a very deep level and loved it and was childlike in it. And so I learned about the healing properties of plants and the importance of drinking good water and uh, having fun and trying to keep a clear, joyful mind, right? And hope and optimism. And that the more you are bent in that direction, the more things get attracted into your sphere that are supposed to be teachers. And so if you're paying attention, you realize you're in school like 24/7 and stuff is coming at you that you're supposed to be learning like all the time. And that to me is healing too.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you so much. I'll just open it up to the four of you. I mean, what does ancestral healing mean to you? How do you call on your ancestors? I mean, David is doing, some of you know that David's been doing this incredible historical relational work with his extended family, Black family and white family in the South. And, you know, that's the story of African America and white America. And not just white America and African America, but, you know, Dave, like, as far as I know, David, and I've known him for some years now, David doesn't come out like and identify as a mixed person, but I drew him into this because of that, of how I see him healing his extended family, which is this American family, and back to West Africa. So hopefully we'll get a little bit of that. I'm so waiting for the book and the movie and the TV series and like sleeping bag merchandise and like everything that's going to come out of that. But yeah, anyone else? What do you, please talk about whatever's on your heart, mind, spirit about ancestral healing and what you want to share.
I mean, I can speak briefly to that. My situation is a bit complex in that I don't know my dad's side of the family very well, which is the Black side. And then there's also the added fun layer of the slave trade and what that did to Black folks in their relation to their original cultures. And so a lot of my version of ancestral healing is just trying to get closer to the ancestors, trying to recover some of that history, some of that culture, some of that loss of identity. And through that practice, feel like there are ancestors to call on, to commune with, which is a long and arduous process.
I mean,
Yes, indeed.
yeah.
There used to be, well, actually, I think they still exist, but during slavery times in Brazil, there was a grassroots organization among free Black folk, mostly women, and enslaved Black women, called Sociedade do Boa Morte, the Society for a Good Death. There's almost all Bantu-related nations and peoples in Central and West Africa share a common belief that being able to die a good death is one of the most important pieces of your entire life, and that part of your engagement in community is meant to set that up, to set up a good death for yourself, a good passage from this world, so to speak, into becoming an ancestor. And that was so viciously stripped away, that opportunity for a good death, a right death, a righteous death, from those roughly 2 million people ever made it to the New World from the African coast, whose bodies were thrown overboard to feed the sharks and whose bones underneath the ocean trace the passageway of the Middle Passage. And that's only part of the reason that I believe North America and the Caribbean are are so haunted, right, is because all those souls who were never given a chance for that good death that they anticipated from the time that, they were little, could come, and that the end they were handed was going to be so merciless and pitiless and evil. So, I'm so heartened to see pockets of folk all over the country. Virginia, North Carolina, Maryland, Missouri, Indiana. I'm trying to think of where else I've seen these, where groups of mostly African American, but bless them, a sprinkling of white genealogists too, many of whom are descended from former slave owners, have this sense of mission that they're acting out right now, trying to rebuild and reestablish boundaries for old graveyards in which the enslaved were buried. And often it was an unceremonious thing where they dig a shallow hole, shovel the body into the hole, put up a little wooden marker, and over the generations, those old slave graveyards have been destroyed, and they've got parking lots and strip malls and even churches on top of them. But there's this beautiful movement underway to, wherever and however possible, restore those graveyards. And part of it has to do with appropriate ceremonies in multiple African languages, not just English, to remember those who were so unceremoniously buried, so that our folk can speak directly to the ancestors. And the few white folk I know who've been involved with that, it's been a great spiritual thing for them too, to be able to say, on behalf of those who did this to you, people from whom I'm descended, I'm sorry, and I'm trying to make it right now with you. May you rest well. There's only little pockets of people, but I believe that on some spiritual level, all these efforts are having a major effect and can have a potentially larger effect on kind of where we sit with each other in this country. So I just wanted to share that work is going on, and that I think, quiet as it is, and as unimportant as it may look to a lot of people, to me, it feels really important and good and definitely healing.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
If I may speak next, I'm following so many threads from Ty and David in terms of just, ancestral trauma does not go away, and that is what we're dealing with in this country until it's healed. And it doesn't matter who you are, that is going to keep trickling forward until it's dealt with. And I also feel like maybe I need to take a pause too. And so my understanding of ancestral healing is in large part due to my training with my teacher, Myra Nishowski, and that's one of his main life, works is working on transgenerational trauma and ancestral healing. And so I want to credit him as a teacher, because this is not coming from me, this is coming from him and also the lineages before him. But we have to consider place as a part of this. And so what David is saying too about ritually healing, for example, the graveyards, and burial places, I do think that there's so much power in the intersectionality of also ancestral healing and place, because we are a part of place, whether we were, people who came over as settlers, enslaved peoples, just wherever you are, we have to consider place as well. And, that we are also on land that is stolen if you're not native, and I'm not native, I'm a settler here, and this land holds a lot of trauma too, that's also, rippling out. So I just think that, the ancestral healing work has to happen on the individual level for all of us. And just as a mixed race person who is also part white, or I don't like that language of part, but like, like I'm mixed race Korean and white, and I feel like I have to do a lot of work, also to work on those white ancestors and to try to, get my white family and other, people that I have reached into, to try to like do that work to heal a lot of the trauma that's happening right now and is still alive. So I just kind of feel like the work is there for all of us. Like, and I want to encourage, especially white people, to take a look at your ancestors. And I just got to say, like, I do this with clients, like this is a part of my professional work too. Sometimes people don't want to touch ancestral healing, or they don't want to touch, like working with ancestors and connecting to them because they're ashamed of them, or they're not happy with who they were. And that's like, that's a part of the work. Like you gotta you gotta do the work. And that there are ways to ask, like just simply ask your ancestors who did wrong to be a part of that healing too, because like your ancestors are bound, by contract to help clean up the mess that they created. So I just want to say that, especially for people who are thinking about this on their own too, that you can call on your ancestors to help clean up the mess, and we all need to do that.
I'm gonna talk from a Korean adopted perspective, where ancestors. I mean, this can be really for. I'm not gonna speak for everyone, but for me, it's I'm actually I've come to describe myself as I'm a pretty haunted person, and it, and that was really really hard for me to kind of accept. And I have been reunited with my Korean family maybe 3 years now, and I've always been connected ever since I was young. I've always heard a grandmother, a harmony spirit. A harmony spirit always talked to me from when I was very young. And I was, there was always a sense of knowing that I come from Korea, right? And um, um, it's like I always had the sense that physically I was separated, but my umbilical cord spiritually was never severed. And so through, but through, and I did it through writing, I did it through my own like leaning in and listening to the ancestors and the spirits, that I would I fought even a lot, because like, and I fought and I said like, well, if you want me if you want me to listen to you and then why did you send me away? You've cut me from language, you've cut me from culture, you've made, like, I feel really, really insecure and uneasy in like Korean communities, right? This trauma. But then, through reunions, through talking to the spirits throughout the years, there is this understanding of ancestral trauma beyond my own, right? Just there's so many deeper levels, and beyond womanese, right? And there's something so healing, but I think that it's so fragmented with these separations. And I work with a lot of Korean adoptees as well, and in many different places in their journeys. And like a lot of times I've been hearing a lot of people talk about the fogs that they're emerging out of. But these fogs keep us protected, but they're so disconnected from ancestry. And even that fear of pain, and it's just so powerful and overwhelming, that a lot of us don't get that ancestral healing. It's even really like, and I've been doing this for years, and I've even been listening to my ancestors. And they sometimes come in my dreams. 미안해요, 미안해요, 죄송합니다. They're so like full of shame. And it's so interesting because before reunion, I didn't know the whole story. My papers were all lies, And these were the ancestors that took me away from my omani. my mother. And so it's very different story. So now I'm like, oh, I get the meaneos. I get the I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, child, right? In the grief. And so that ancestral healing is so powerful. And I feel so much gratitude that my ancestors at least did not sever that an umbilical cord. And so now finally I've gotten the energy and I'm working on a collection of creative nonfiction around this experience that is around Barigongju. And it's around like my re-envisioning of her like as myself. So more of a memoir yet collection, but like this process, the spiritual process as a Korean adoptee. Barigongju is the first Korean shaman, but it's never been looked at. But when I read her story, I was like, oh my God, she's a Korean adoptee. The first shaman was a Korean adoptee. And all these things just fell into place. So that's what I'm really trying to look and deconstruct this with Korea's history. Very, very huge trauma.
Anything else before I launch I have so many things. I have so many things that I'm thinking about. Thank you all. We've got time for one more, maybe me question, unless you have questions for each other before we get to community discussion / questions, comments. Let's see. I don't know. I'll throw out a few that I had, and if any resonate. You know, one is, how is living in the Midwest or in Minnesota as a person of color with your particular histories kept you here? Are you called to other places? Are you feeling tied as a healer? Just if you want to talk about place at all, or what do you wish for our communities here in Minnesota and beyond, but or Midwest in terms of healing? What futures are you seeing or feeling or sensing? How can your community support you, whether that's livelihood, professional growth, sharing the burdens, the work, and the joys? Anything you want from institutions or organizations that you're not seeing? Daily or regular practices that you recommend? People always want, like, I always forget to be practical and like, what about, pragmatic things? What daily or regular practices do you recommend others explore for their own individual, ancestral, collective healing? Are there things that you're really relying on yourself right now or seeing as very supportive for others close to you? So those were some of my other questions, but also feel free to say anything that hasn't come up that you would like to share, and we'll get to whatever we want to talk about. Yeah, thank you.
One thing that I'm thinking of is, I would be excited to hear the other panelists speak to how ancestor connection looks like in their lives, and that might also maybe for the audience also give them some ideas about how to connect to their ancestors, and maybe how that intersects with art, because for me, like, I know my art is also a way for me to connect to my ancestors, and I do move through that too, but I would love to hear from the others just on how ancestor connection looks like, maybe on a more mundane level, because I think sometimes people don't know where to start, and I'd be happy, like, maybe at the end to also give my answer, but I just kind of offering that up as one way to maybe address some of those topics.
Well, I know, just real briefly, some years ago, I think 2005, maybe 2006, I did some DNA testing and got very lucky very quickly, and found and reconnected with some long lost kin in West Africa. They're Ewe folk from the border country of Ghana and Togo. And ran into a storyteller, friend of mine, who said, hey, you know, walk around with bare feet as much as you can while you're there. Because he said, I want to share a reading with you from Father John O'Donohue, who wrote this amazing little volume called Anam Cara, the soul's friend. This is a Catholic priest who got kicked out of the priesthood because his teachings became too universalistic and too nature bound for the church to allow him to stay in the church. But he talks in the chapter that my friend steered me to about the power of reconnecting with, as he said, the mud you're from. And sure enough, that first trip to Ghana that year, there was something tangible and really powerful about walking around barefoot on this soil and walking through a village that some of my ancestors had helped found in 1530, they said, visiting the depression in the ground that is all that's left of the original well they dug back then, and eating in contumere, this wild green that grows everywhere. And when I ate my first bowl of contumere, I felt like some missing connector, some missing wire that had never been hooked up, and my body was suddenly hooked up. And my body had, you know, one of those, well, God Almighty, where has this stuff been all my life? Kind of feeling, right? Kind of experience. So, so it's that experience of feeling hooked up again, you know, connected, not only with blood kin, but with literally the soil. You know, my first day there in the village, I bought a little package of, they're sort of like sugar wafers, from a sister who was sitting by the side of the road selling them. And she makes them right on the spot. So every one of them has a little bit of sand in it, you know, because the beach is just over here. So, you know, there was this moment where she offered me my first one from her hand to mine. And the little thing is like a communion wafer, right? So it was just a mind-blowing experience, because it's literally as if I'm consuming the soil itself and feeling this charge from it, right? It was one of the most magical days of my life, you know, my first day back in the home country. And then the ancestors hooked things up, right? I started hearing from people, from the diaspora of our family, you know, people who were living in England, people who were living in Germany, saying, hey, we heard about you, cousin. And if you're ever passing through this way, come check us out. You always got a place to stay. I mean, those sorts of things. A cousin telling me, you know, you may not know, but the men in our family, we're famous for being able to disappear from one place and reappear in another. Let's you and me go to the bush sometime and I'll show you how it's done. I mean, just crazy stuff that I was never expecting, right, was thrown my way because of that connection. So, you know, the journey continues, and part of it is learning Ewe, learning Twi, learning Kikongo, because since then I've encountered other relatives from other parts of Central Africa, and we're in touch with each other. So we're involved with this worldwide movement to help restore indigenous languages everywhere. And they're just as excited when I send them something about local school kids learning Anishinaabe here in Minnesota as they are to hear, you know, more kids learning Kikongo in the Congo, with my really lousy French, I had an initial conversation with a relative just found in the Congo, and we're talking, and I said, wait, why are we speaking in French? We should be speaking in Kikongo. And he broke out crying. He was like, yeah, you know what, you're absolutely right. But I hardly speak Kikongo, even though that's my grandparents' and my great grandparents' language going back generations. So he said, yeah. You know, I know somebody who's teaching out of London, and he hooked me up, and we're both learning Kikongo together online. So, you know, there's another example. And just real briefly, our housemate here in this house, and I can't even remember exactly how that came together, but you know, we live with somebody who's Ewe and from the border country between Togo and Ghana, and his community takes really good care of him. He's had kidney failure, and you know, this house has been a refuge for him. So our refrigerator is always full of food from Togo, you know, because the sisters in the community who take care of him and make sure he's okay, and who by extension take care of me too. So, you know, once you are on this path toward reclamation, right, of your ancestral roots, it just doesn't quit. It keeps feeding you, literally.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all that. That was really, really beautiful. Gives me hope for myself. Yeah, kind of on the contrasting end of that, and I don't want to get too redundant, but yeah, like not having that clear sense of connection to the ancestors. It has kind of become my mission, almost my life's work, to surround myself with this found family and these found ancestors, whether they're with us or not, right? Like I have people who I consider my living ancestors, the folks who came before me, the POC creatives who are changing the world in the ways that I would like to change the world. Though in this reality in which I don't really feel I have any ancestors that I can connect to, those have become my ancestors. The creatives really doing the work right now, and those who have paved the way over generations. So I think there's something to be said for that too, for found family, for found ancestors.
Yeah, there is.
You know, something that I haven't voiced, but I learned from Grace Lee Boggs, when I went to interview her in 2005. You know, so, and when I started just following her as a teacher to work, of course, it's not her idea, but she talked about this a lot, about working intergenerationally. And I do notice that we are multiple generations here on our panel. You know, Hye-Kyong and I are Gen Xers, and Merle, I call Merle a zillennial, or no, an exennial, but they get to decide how to identify. And I'm Thai. I'm not sure about what you would say your your American generation is, and how that, if that seems to make a difference in your ideas about healing, or your, yeah, I don't know. If anyone wants to talk about generational stuff, I know it's a little bit after 8, but just putting that out there, or if people in the room also have thoughts about that. Yeah.
I just want to get all nonlinear, because with the generational stuff, you know, it's like I feel like I was born into a certain time frame, and so I have my own personal experiences, and you know, it's like I have to, when I do this work, you know, of ancestral healing, like I'm reaching across time, past, future, now, you know, and it all exists at once. So for me, it's very nonlinear. So actually, for me, it's a tricky question, because, you know, my generation has a small impact, I think, in the larger picture on who I am and what I do in terms of my healing work. It does have an impact on, you know, maybe how I, you know, who my community is and who I have reached into. But actually, for me, the work is super, super nonlinear and broad, and that like I'm working with people I've never met before. I mean, I'm talking about ancestors. I have no idea who they are, you know? And I want to just jump back to what David was saying about the importance of place. Like if you have the opportunity to go back to the places where your ancestors are from, even if you just have to start with one place, like go there because it's riveting what type of information will just like on a cellular level come to you. And I also just want to say to just kind of fuck with time even more, is that, you know, sometimes timing is a weird thing, you know, and sometimes the answers will come before you understand why those things
Okay.
are being shown to you, you know? And I think that's what exactly what David was saying earlier too, of like the ancestors are gonna keep talking to you as soon as you tune in and they're gonna show you the way. But you know, you just gotta hang in there because, you know, you gotta kind of surrender in some ways, you know, and just go with it. Because and I'm gonna tell you just a real quick story. You know, I was shown this castle over and over and over again. You know, I saw it in my heart. I was working as a server, polishing silverware, and I kept seeing this damn castle in my heart. And I was like, what is this about? This is before I had done any like international travel on my own as an adult. And I was like, you know what? Let's play a game. I'm on my computer a lot. And so I did a Google image search. I was like, you know, this castle feels like it's probably in Ireland or Scotland, but I'm going to guess Ireland. I don't know what Ireland feels like. I've never been there. And I could tell that, you know, I could see an ocean through the window. I was like, okay, it's a castle by the ocean. So I looked at castles in Ireland that were by the ocean. I finally went to an image where I got like a hit. You know, like if you've done any sort of like tarot or whatever, there's a little zing, right? So I like look at this image and I'm like, that's what I saw, you know, and it was this castle in Northern Ireland. Well, I come to find out years later, like if I trace some of the names that I have record of, like that is a castle that's a part of one of the clans that would have been one of my ancestral clans. And it's wild, you know. So I just want to, I'm just sharing that because, you know, whether that's happening through a mundane channel like, you know, like the yeah, just like the food you eat, you know, or like yeah, the images you're looking at, or like pay attention to what is happening on your like in your internal landscape. Like those are all clues. And it's not something that's far removed. Like I mean, I just kind of asked like my own ancestors, what do I need to bring into the space tonight? And like they just wanted to share, like they are here, like they are in us, they are in our bones, and they're always in this space. So like you just have to ask for them.
Thank you, Merle. Alyssa has noted that we are at the Q&A portion. So we are ready for your cues. We have the A's, or just listen. Yeah, I don't know. Alyssa, how do you want to do that?
Hi, everyone. I just want to say that if you would prefer to unmute, you are welcome to ask your questions at any time. You are also, we also have the chat feature if you would like to add your questions as they come up in the chat. We have not had any questions come through the chat as of yet. So I'm just going to give a few moments of silence for us to do some breathing and to make space for anyone who might be preparing to unmute and ask a question at this time.
Are you unmuted?
I am unmuted, my love. And we have some questions coming through. Thank you to John Penny for your question in the chat. What is the feasibility? One moment. My little one is anxious to watch the end of a program, as you might have heard a moment ago. I'm going to read John's question from the chat. What is the feasibility that we move ahead in life without ever finding ancestral roots, rather just moving forward as an originator of a new world culture? This would encompass developing new art and new concepts of what culture can be. Anyone would like to respond to that question and comments from John?
I think I might be, somewhat uniquely positioned to respond to this because I'm an adoptee who's not in reunion, and I probably won't ever be in reunion. It's very unlikely that I will ever actually meet or re-meet in person, not in, the dreamscape, any actual Korean relatives, elders, cousins, siblings, parents, I'm 47, so the likelihood of, there could be some living grandparents, but for me and for so many, there's only 2% of Korean adoptees, and there are 200,000 of us worldwide are in reunion. So while 100% of the memoirs by Korean adoptees include reunion, most of us, that's not our experience, and it's not going to be our experience. And so my whole life has been lived with this really tormenting mystery about who I am, who I would have been, who I was, who my people are. And this, what Dr. Pauline Boss at the University of Minnesota coined as ambiguous loss when she was working with survivors and families of 9/11 victims and POWs who were MIA, and other people who are experiencing the kind of either disembodied loss or embodied loss, like people whose loved ones were developing Alzheimer's, or people whose family members were missing, where there's not going to be any closure, right? This whole idea of, I think, we can think about Western ideas of healing and needing closure. And most of us who are people of color, who are immigrants or children of immigrants, there's so much disruption, displacement. Those of us who are descended from enslaved, stolen, kidnapped, captive, intergenerationally captive people. We don't have that privilege and luxury of these unbroken lineages, right? And so what does healing mean when there's not going to be that conventional closure in that sense of knowing, or in that sense of having correct paperwork or correct family registries or any of the things that civilizations do, right? So, for me, that's why I've been doing all of this other work, because it doesn't just affect me, it affects my children, and it's going to affect their children if they have any. I'm that originator, and so I'm that like rebooted matriarch of this new lineage, but it's the same lineage. We all go back to those same 7 women, right, in Mother Africa. Like we are all, before that, we all go back to this ancestral placental mammal that I'm really into, this little like rat-like thing. But right, we're life from the sun. But I think that we even if we can't like physically or socially in our lifetime, in this timeline, whatever, connect with those ancestors, that doesn't mean, just like Merle saying, they are literally in my body. Actually, Hye-Kyong and I are like 5th cousins or something, and we found out from DNA. It's just, even though I grew up in Illinois, blah blah blah. So it's the mystery. This is the life work. And in terms of creating, culture is always being created, right? And so I think, all of us, our work as artists too, is about that, like, stitching these worlds and wounds together to make new wholenesses, to express our intrinsic wholeness. I'll stop there, but yeah, this is kind of the question. Yeah, thank you.
And Sun Yung, if I may add on to what you were saying, if I didn't mean to cut you off there if I jumped in too soon. Yeah, is that I just wanted to share for the audience members too, of like, what does absence, or what do like buried secrets look like when they come up calling for healing? Like, I want to just address John's question about, like, I don't think we can build the new without dealing with the past. And that's exactly the problem that we're in right now in this country. We need to be dreaming of the new. But that can't happen without reconciling the past and taking account of what has happened ancestrally. And I want to just share that, you know, whether we are conscious of it or not, ancestral healing issues are going to show themselves, whether that's through illness, patterns in death, patterns in, you know, we all have these family dynamics that we see repeat themselves, right? And it's actually the secrets and those things that are buried and those absences and those gaps, they are going to show themselves whether we like it or not, whether we, you know, it's by bringing consciousness to it, and it's about bringing it to light, that, you know, that healing can happen and that those patterns can shift and those patterns can start to change. Even if you don't know who your ancestors were directly, like I have a lot of gaps in my knowledge, you know, but it doesn't mean that that's not possible spiritually to connect to them, you know, because my ancestors are in me, you know, so we all have these gaps, we all have these secrets, but ultimately, like every human that has made me over time, like they are in me, and I have access to them, even if I can't name them, you know, so I just want to put that out there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments, thoughts, feelings from? You just pop into the matrix.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm Marty. I've had this experience recently where my sister became a grandmother a couple of weeks ago. And my sister and I knew our great grandmother. So we've experienced 6 generations ourselves, just in our lifetime, which is something that, you know, is much more common when you get older. So, and I'm not sure anybody in those 6 generations would be your go-to person for practical advice necessarily. So I'm wondering if the point of connection to ancestors isn't about that individual line in a family tree, but more about connection to a collective wisdom and source of knowledge. There's parts of my family tree I can take back way far, and then I know which ones came from Ireland a few generations ago. But I'm wondering if I could get some comments on connection to ancestors as individuals or to a collective source.
I've been talking a lot, so please cut me off. But I just want to give like a quick answer, is that we all have ancestors who are guides, who have done their work, who are available to us. And you might have to go back, like really, really far back. They may not be recent ancestors. And even if you can't name them, like I would just say, like, you know, just call on them. Call for like an ancestor who is essentially like a guide for you. And you might find that some individuals actually come out of the woodwork. But also collectively, you know, you have ancestors who, you know, I think it's both. It's like you got to work with ancestors individually as well as collectively, because there also are individuals you might have to go to as like the root cause of a problem. And that's what I meant by problematic ancestors back when I first started talking, is that, you know, sometimes the healing is actually going back to where the problem started and asking that ancestor to choose something differently, or asking that ancestor to see the impact of their actions. And, you know, so I think that it is important to consider the individual, not only the ones who are problematic, but also the ones who are there to help us. And I don't want that to get lost in this conversation too, is that our ancestors are also there to help us.
Oh, thank you. That's great.
I mean, just like, you know, they owe us, just like we're gonna owe. It's gonna come back, you know. We're owing our future generations, even if we don't have our own children from our own bodies. You may have collateral descendants, you know, from siblings, or, you know, whoever is claiming you as an ancestor in the future, right? I mean, we never know when that moment is coming. Yeah. Hey, Kyung, did you want to say, I mean, this is your whole job, kind of, so you, is there anything you want to add? Therapist?
I don't know as a therapist.
Or, yeah,
um,
somatic.
I'm still kind of on the I'm just noticing generations too about, I was thinking about, and so I have 7 children. And I have always wanted children, and many children, and there's no qualms that some of this is, I don't know, maybe it's ancestral kind of connections, but it's been healing. But it's interesting because I see a question that I wondered about how you all deal with fear and other internal resistances that arise when you're trying to work on your own healing and ancestral healing, communal healing. And that, this kind of connects to what I noticed, that for me personally, when I fight, I've fought with my ancestors, because like a lot of my work has been prior to reunion. I mean, a lot of my work, it's amazing. When I was 18 and I first had my first child, there was this great big paranoia I felt that my mother-in-law was going to take my child from me. And that ended up to be actually the story, that I had no idea that that's what happened to my Oma, right, with me and my Oma. But it's interesting because, so I fought a lot with the ancestors about like whys and what do you want, and all these things. But that I've noticed, as I don't pick up or I tune them out. By the way, I'm sorry, I'm kind of nonlinear in my thinking. To connect to an earlier question Merle asked about, like, when I do somatic experiencing or brain spotting, boom, that, like, anytime I try to like quiet the spirits down, harmony is right there. They're so excited when I engage in somatic experience or brain spotting. It's like, yes, we got your attention. Here we are, right? And so they just show. So, but the more that I resist, I notice when I feel fearful, I don't want to do what they're telling me. I don't want to listen. I just want to be numb. I just want to be, my children experience things, and I'm noticing it flowing to another generation. And so they'll start having nightmares or sleep terrors, or they see more activity that goes to them. So it's my responsibility to try to figure this out so that I can really help them, and also take some of the pressure off them, if that makes any sense. Merle, we were having a conversation the other day, and I thought you so beautifully articulated this, about like the faucet. Do you mind talking a little bit about that?
Sure. So the faucet metaphor, Hye-Kyong, can I share the person we have in common?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So permission's important too, as a part of ancestral work and spiritual work. So Hye-Kyong and I have both been, going to a Korean mudang shaman named Jun Kim in New York. So we had a conversation about Korean shamanism, Hye-Kyong and I, in private. And the faucet metaphor is actually, Boseolnim Mudang Jun Kim's metaphor. So I want to credit her. But basically, the spirits are kind of like, if you imagine like a flow of water, and let's say that they're flowing, they're going into Hye-Kyong. And that's kind of what, when you look at like a lot of indigenous spiritualities, like the oldest ways, it's like a lot of times that's what it is like, a spirit is moving through us. Like we are like, kind of vessels, right? And so if spirits are moving through Hye-Kyong, let's say Hye-Kyong is like, no way, I'm going to shut off this faucet. Well, the spirits don't care. They're like, we're just going to keep flowing, you know, like if you shut off a water faucet, you know, but you have other pipes in the house, that water is just going to find, you know, the path of least resistance to keep flowing forward. So that's what the faucet metaphor is, but it's not mine actually. So it's it's coming from yeah, Mudong Jen Kim.
David, you want to add, are you having thoughts? Anything you
Oh,
want to add?
all kinds of thoughts, and I'm also trying to read the chat
No, I'm,
and pick up on what other folks are saying. There's so much love and appreciation being passed around. It's lovely to see. So yeah, I don't know that I have anything else to add from my own experience other than to say that it's been really nourishing to hear all this perspective and all these stories from everybody else, and to feel you know, all the common spirit that's in the room, the hunger and the need to talk about this. So I'm so glad that you know, you were able to create this thing and make it happen. And you know, it looks as though a 2.0 and a 3.0 version of this need to happen not too far down the line too, to kind of keep the discussion going.
yeah, thank you.
I think we have time for any final thoughts from our panelists, and then we're going to begin closing the evening. It's late on a Thursday night, and we're so grateful to everyone for hanging in. So I'm just going to open the floor for any final thoughts. Sun Yung, from you as well, please, if you feel moved to share any final things. And please feel free to quickly peruse the chat for links to books and links to resources that have been shared during the conversation as well.
Gen Z, Ty, Chapman, do you want to say something?
Is that my new title? Is it now Gen Z?
You are our Gen Z ambassador. It's a lot of pressure.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I mostly just want to humbly and sincerely say thank you to my fellow panelists. I think so much of you have very different experiences and perspectives on ancestry than myself. And so just hearing your beautiful experiences with ancestors is very inspiring and hope-giving for me. So I appreciate each and every one of you.
Thank you. Yes, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for coming and sharing your energy and good spirit. Thank you, David. Thank you, Merle. Thank you, Hye-Kyong. Thank you, Ty. Thank you, Alyssa, and all of the amazing, amazing world building work that MidWest Mixed does. So people can donate, right, to MidWest Mixed. So, you know, my fellow panelists, this is a labor of love for them. They did get paid, but not enough to buy a new Cadillac, and neither did Alyssa. We all, hopefully many of us, know how hardworking and what a genius Alyssa is, and needs support, and MidWest Mix needs support. If you appreciate this event, please support MidWest Mix so we can have more. They're creating radical, hospitable, deep spaces for all of us. So thank you so much. Thank you. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. Reach out to me or Alyssa if you have questions or thoughts and ideas. Be well, and please take care of yourselves. Thank you.
Have a great night,
Thank
everyone.
Good night, all.
Thank you.
Peace.
Good night.